the books. We also have Konya municipality in Turkey, also the Yunus Emre Institute. Politicians in Turkey are also amongst us. So welcome to you all. We're also supported by the Islamic courses, the Ibrahim College, Ash-Shatibi Centre and Mosque, Finsbury Park Mosque, North London Central Mosque, FOSIS, the Federation of Student Islamic Societies, Bosnia Trust, Faith Inspire, Salam, and Strive. So we've all been very helpful. Thank you all for your contribution in putting this program together. The format of this evening's program will be, we'll have a number of presentations from the front, as well as we'll have a couple of contributions through video, because two of the speakers are unable to make it physically here. Namely, Martin Bell, who was in Bosnia during the conflict in Sarajevo, during the siege of Sarajevo. He was actually injured whilst reporting. Because of his age and the heat wave, he's not feeling too well. We tried to get him online, but unfortunately, he's not really feeling up to it, so he sends his apologies. We'll be also joined by Sheikh Yasser Qadi. He sent us a video. Initially, he wanted to join us online, but as we speak, he's on a flight to some other country. So he sent us a special video to relay to you. Also, apologies from Professor Admir Mulasomovic. He is the professor in Bosnia, CEO of the Aurora Foundation in Sarajevo, author of several books. He was also part of the 4 Knights Brigade in Bosnia during the conflict, and he was severely wounded. So he knows firsthand what people went through in Bosnia. He also sends us a video, which we'll share with you very shortly. So the other thing, just to let you know, is this program has been live streamed on the Cordoba Foundation YouTube page and Facebook. So if you have friends and families not able to make it here tonight, they can watch it from home. And the book sale will be available throughout the whole program at the back of the hall. So please do purchase a copy if you can, inshallah. To move on, it's my honor to now introduce to you the Ambassador of Bosnia and Herzegovina to the UK, His Excellency Usman Topkajic, to make a few welcoming remarks before we move on. Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Falik. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good evening. It's my great honor and pleasure to be here with you tonight on this occasion. And I want to congratulate publishers, Ketebe Publishing House, for preparing and making this edition, this translation of the well-known book of late President Alija Izetbegović. The book is written before Mr. Izetbegović was known as a statesman. And indeed, it reflects one dimension for which he will be very well remembered. That dimension of man of thinking, man of dilemmas, man of studying, man of searching for formulas, how to find place in the world between East and West, as is said in this book, world which is changing in last 100 of years dramatically. Mr. Izetbegović was known in Bosnia and Herzegovina as a statesman as well, as a father of our nation. Being elected as first president of Bosnia and Herzegovina, he led the country to the independence, and then through the brutal war, brutal aggression, to the peace. I was privileged and fortunate to have worked with him in some of those years. And I very well remember occasions and messages of Mr. Izetbegović on, for example, fall of Srebrenica. These days we mark 31st anniversary of massacre which was declared genocide by International Court of Justice and International Criminal Tribunal in The Hague. I remember messages and preparations of Mr. Izetbegović for peace negotiations in Dayton. I remember his messages when he and his delegation returned from Dayton, bringing peace to the country after 3.5 or more of the brutal war and victims. In all those situations, I had in front of me statesmen, but also men of standing, men of care for human beings. And that was, I think, always something which was present in all thinking or actions of late Mr. Izetbegović. Care for the people, care for the others, also not only one group, not only one ethnic group or religious group, care for the others, trying to find formula which will satisfy more so to enable life together. Bosnia and Herzegovina remembers work and life of Mr. Izetbegović. What we have today is very much because of his actions and his deeds. As Mr. Holbrooke, who was leading peace negotiations, said, it was Mr. Izetbegović who asked for Bosnia and Herzegovina to continue as one country, internally rearranged, but to continue as one country, and that's what we have. In the last period, 30 years after peace agreement was reached, Bosnia and Herzegovina reached good progress. Not always as much and as fast as we wanted and expected and needed to have. But again, much has been improved, changed in our relations with neighbors, in our relations with the European Union, in reconstruction of the country, building better life for all of us. But there are still those who are opposing progress, who are blocking progress, who are negating what was established, ruled by international courts. And that's what prevents country from moving forward. We have friends here in this country, we have friends abroad. Together with them, with forces inside of Bosnia and Herzegovina, with resilience of our population, I am confident the country will move forward and join prosperous nations in European continent. In the meantime, many of you probably have visited Bosnia and Herzegovina. And if you did, I invite you to visit again. For those who didn't, I invite you to come enjoy beautiful country, welcoming, hospitable people, offering good food, hospitality, good life, and everything else, so that I believe once you visit, you will want to come again. Want to thank you, this panel, for gathering and readiness to talk about Mr. Izetbegović and his work, his life. And I want to thank again all of you for gathering here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador of Bosnia and Herzegovina here. Our ambassador, I must say, he's a people's ambassador. Whenever you ask him, he's always responding with a positive message and an answer. Only 2-3 days ago, we were honored to have him deliver a keynote at the Tower Hamlets Council commemorating Srebrenica genocide for the second year. He was here last year. He's a regular visitor to this mosque also. So thank you, Ambassador, for all your time and everything you do to help us and to help the cause of Bosnia and Srebrenica in particular. Before I go into our next speaker is Sabina, but just to set the scene, we have a short video to show you, and the video is titled, Who Was Alija Izetbegović? It's a short video, so please watch it now.
Alija Izetbegović, the first president of the Presidency of Sovereign Bosnia and Herzegovina, was born on the 8th of August, 1925. He died on October 19th, 2003. During the course of his 78 years, this man endured enough blows of fate to fill several lifetimes. The life of a writer who became the most famous political prisoner in the former Yugoslavia. The life of a man who founded and led the largest political party in the history of Bosnia. The life of a statesman, war commander, and indubitably, the life of the most acclaimed leader of his people in its entire history. The steep path he traveled, both descending and ascending, is one that only a truly courageous and unusually tenacious character could have taken. The biography of Alija Izetbegović is irrefutable proof that each of us on this earth advances along a predetermined path. Otherwise, the 21-year-old would never have ended up in prison, his dreams and plans brutally cut short. And above all, he would have avoided that bitter experience several decades later, as a mature family man with good position and 3 adult children. There is no doubt that Alija Izetbegović would have never willingly waged war, however necessary and just it might have been. And above all, he would have never wanted to witness such inexpressible suffering, such hardship, and the deaths of so many innocent people. However, man proposes, but God disposes.
Thank you. That was a short video to set the scene for really the main feature of this program and the main guest, and that is Sabina Berberović, the daughter of the late President Alija Izetbegović. She's taken the trouble to come to the UK to address this audience, and also over the weekend in Bradford Literature Festival. Let me say a few words about who Sabina is. She's a founding member of the Alija Izetbegović Foundation based in Bosnia. She worked as a teacher at the Sarajevo Madrasa. She had a long stint as a translator and interpreter, including for her father when he was president of Bosnia. She has published a number of translation works, including with Muhammad Hamidullah, an Introduction to Islam, Alija Izetbegović, Islam Between East and West, Jalaluddin Rumi, the book on In the Inner Self, John Esposito and Dalia Mujahid on Who Speaks in the Name of Islam, and M. Reeves, Muhammad in Europe. So it is my huge pleasure and honor to present to you Sabina Berberović to say a few words about the life and the works of her father, Alija Izetbegović. Please give a warm welcome to Sabina.
Thank you, Dr. Falik. Dear friends, Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Thank you for taking your time to be with us this evening. On behalf of the Alija Izetbegović Foundation, I would like to express our gratitude to the Cordoba Foundation for hosting this event with us. to all our partners that Dr. Falik has already mentioned, but I will repeat some of them, like Cordoba Foundation, Konya City Administration, and London Yunus Emre Institute. Ketebe publishers who put their professional efforts into this new edition of the book Islam Between East and West in English, as well as to distinguished panelists who will present the book. Thank you. This would not be possible without all of you. And a most cordial welcome to our Bosnians, if there are any in the audience. Thank you very much for joining us. Hvala vam puno. Okay. So tomorrow we are marking the Srebrenica Genocide Commemoration Day, the day that my people and my country will never forget. As for the rest of the world, we can only hope that they will honor the UN General Assembly resolution on Srebrenica from 2024, inviting all member states, their academic institutions, and other relevant stakeholders to ensure appropriate education and public awareness raising activities. We know that here in the UK, such activities have been organized for years. It is important. It means a lot to us, and it does matter. So thank you. 31 years on, we remember the victims of genocide, and we stand with their families, thousands of women and children who lost their fathers, their brothers, their husbands. It takes immense courage to continue living after such a terrible experience. But they are enduring the unendurable, and they are accepting the unacceptable. The women of Srebrenica rose from their position of victims to become our heroes, and they raised their children with pride and dignity. Human dignity, freedom, justice, they are just some of the major concepts elaborated in the writings of my late father, Alija Izetbegović, whose book, Islam Between East and West, we are presenting today. Our distinguished panelists will talk about the very contents of the book, about ideas and thoughts explored in it. But there is a story behind the book. During the World War II, my father was a high school student. He read a great deal, maybe even too much, mainly philosophical and political books. And he felt somewhat conflicted between communist ideas and religious beliefs. But eventually, it was in his faith, Islam, that he found all the core values that he, as a young man, was searching for. For him, a universe without God was a universe without meaning. Inspired by this personal journey of his, he was just a teenager, he began writing a book. He put on paper just basic ideas, structure, thoughts, and the title, Islam Between East and West. In 1946, however, after the war, he was arrested as a member of the Young Muslims organization and sentenced to 3 years in prison. When the police came to search their home, his sister hid the manuscript of the book under the flower chest in their kitchen. It remained hidden until he was released 3 years later. And in the years to come, he collected materials for the book. And only 3 decades later, he began finalizing it. In 1982, he gave the final version to a Bosnian friend in Canada. However, next year, in 1984, he was arrested again as the enemy of the state. 11 agents of the then State Security Service came for him. They searched our home and took him away together with tens of books from his library. This time, the manuscript of the book was in Canada. As they were leaving, I asked my father what we were to do, and he just replied, "Have the book published." So I was a bit confused. Well, he was obviously arrested for his writings, and how could publishing the book help him? Yet we listened to him, and we managed to have book published thanks to his friends in Canada. He was sentenced to 14 years and served almost 6. The book got published in 1984 by the American Trust Publications. However, just a year before the Berlin Wall fall in 1988, the wind of freedom, of change, was felt in communist countries. And a Belgrade private publisher decided to publish the book in our language. It was 1988. The book got out of print a couple of weeks after my father got out of prison. But the books were now in Belgrade, and we were in Sarajevo. We were impatient. It was risky to have them shipped from Belgrade to Sarajevo, so my brother and my husband decided to go on an adventure. They drove to Belgrade, put as many copies as could fit in the trunk of their car, and brought them to Sarajevo. Later on, they boasted how they had to drive on country roads to avoid police, to avoid being stopped and searched, and so on. Maybe. Those were really dangerous times. So far, there have been new editions in Bosnian and in other languages. We are expecting a new edition in Arabic, inshallah, this autumn in Cairo. Now let me conclude with a short quote from my father's introduction to an earlier edition of the book. For the future and practical human endeavors, Islam represents a call to create a person as a bearer of harmony between body and soul, and to build a society whose laws and socio-political institutions are designed to preserve that harmony. Pursued, not disrupted. Islam is or should be a constant pursuit within the flow of history for a state of inner and outer balance. In any case, there is no demand more natural, yet so rarely explored or tested. This goal stands before Islam today, and it will be its specific historical task in the years to come. End of quote. At the end, I hope that the book Islam Between East and West will only bring good, wherever and whenever it is read. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabina, for that very reflective presentation. And inshallah, during the discussion, we can ask some questions and get more out of her, Sabina, when we have the opportunity to ask questions. In the meantime, can I ask people to fill in the chairs in front of you? There are any empty chairs? As you can see, the room is full. We are putting out more chairs at the back, but if there are chairs in front of you, please try to fill in those chairs. Yes, some in the middle here. Please come forward. And it is a bit hot here. Air conditioning is working, but do help yourself some drinks, water. We've just, the group from Turkey just entering, the delegation led by Dr. Belma, Young Turks, students and children of parliamentaries in Turkey. Welcome to the room. If there is no space, maybe, yeah, I'm sure we can fit everyone. We'll just give it a minute for everyone to settle down. Some chairs in the front on the left corner. Okay, let's move on. Thank you, Sabina, for that presentation. She mentioned the young Muslims in Bosnia, which her father was part of. Some of us here remember the Young Muslims or the Young Muslim Organization UK in the 70s and early 80s. He had a similar way of work and methodology. And those of you who went to Bosnia in Sarajevo, if you go to near the where the marketplace is and near the mosque, there is a big cafe. And on the first floor, the Young Muslims, the office is still there. And there are photo exhibition of the early days when young people used to gather, young men and women used to gather for circles, for talks, for camping and outreach. And I think it's a very fascinating thing to see if you do visit Bosnia, the archive, the early history of the Muslim community in Bosnia and the role of young people. So it's very good to see a lot of young people in this audience today. I hope we can all find time and the opportunity to go to Bosnia and visit. It is not only a place of historical relevance, but also a beautiful country for holiday and exploration. So I really urge you to visit Bosnia or talk to someone who's been to Bosnia already. Can I see a show of hands who's been to Bosnia from this hall? Non-Bosnians. MashaAllah, quite a few. So to talk to these people and get their insights and inshallah try and plan for this year or the next. Our next speaker is Omar Farooq Yeni, and he will touch a bit more on the book itself, the key highlights. And Omar Farooq Yeni is the director of Kete Publishing, based in London and Turkey. He is a cultural consultant, an editor, and a traveler. He regularly hosts filmmakers, writers, and thinkers through films and public conversations such as this. He's also the former manager of something a lot of you will be familiar with, Rumi's Cave in London. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Omar Farooq Yeni to shed a bit more light on the book itself. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. And on behalf of Kete Publishing, welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. So it is a real privilege and excitement to celebrate the publication of this new edition of Islam Between East and West. More than 40 years have passed since the book first appeared, yet we believe its questions, its answers, its offers have only become more relevant. In today's fragmented world, marked by deep intellectual, cultural, and spiritual crisis, this feels like a particularly timely moment to reintroduce and revisit Alija Izetbegović's remarkable work. So this is not a book about East or West, nor is it a defense of one civilization against another. It is a profound reflection on what it means to be human. Alija Izetbegović explores the relationship between faith and reason, freedom and responsibility, matter and spirit, inviting readers to look beyond false oppositions and rediscover a more complete understanding of humanity. In these days, we also believe that there has been a significant gap in the intellectual and cultural landscape for many years, particularly in spaces where knowledge, history, and culture can be articulated on their own terms through their own concepts, references, and internal coherence. The task before us today is not simply to participate in existing conversations, but to contribute frameworks and perspectives rooted in our own civilizational memory and intellectual traditions. So we hope this new edition will make a modest contribution to that wider endeavor. That is why we felt this book deserved to be prepared once again for a global readership. This new edition is the result of a careful editorial process with the great efforts and support from the family, undertaken with deep respect for Alija's original work and with the hope that his ideas will continue to reach new readers across cultures, generations, and backgrounds. For us at Kete Publishing, It is a great honor to carry this remarkable work to readers around the world, and Alija's intellectual legacy continues to grow with every passing year. Increasingly, he is recognized not only as the founding president of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but as one of the most original Muslim thinkers of the 20th century, a voice whose reflections speak with striking clarity to the questions of our own age. So we are deeply grateful to the Alija Izetbegović Foundation for their trust and collaboration, and to our hosts, the London Muslim Center and the Cordoba Foundation, for making this evening possible. Finally, thank you all for joining us to celebrate this remarkable work. And I would like to close with the final words of the book, Islam Between East and West. Islam did not derive its name from its laws, its commands and prohibitions, or even the physical and spiritual effort it requires, but from something deeper, something that encompasses and transcends all of that, from a moment of profound realization, from the willingness to endure everything that human existence may demand, from the truth of submission. Submission. Thy name is Islam. So thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Omar Farouk, for that quick, brief, outlook of the book, and we will discuss further in the discussion session, inshallah. And again, like I said to you before, the book is available to buy today at the back of the hall for £10 only. It's reduced rate for this event, so please try and get a copy. And Sabine will be available later on to sign some copies if you so wish. Our next speaker, who is not able to join us, is Dr. Admir Milasnomovic. He is the CEO of Aurora Foundation Sarajevo, author of several books. And as I mentioned before, he is someone who took part in the battle, in the conflict in Bosnia. He was severely wounded as a member of the Four Knights Brigade. We have a video from him who will talk about the historical frame, the book against the backdrop of war and siege. We'll have the video on now, please. Thank you.
Dear hosts, colleagues, friends, audience, Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for the invitation to join you, even in this kind of the way. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to come to London and be there in live, but I hope that these few remarks that I'm going to read down today will contribute to the overall event, and that I will somehow help those who are facing the work of Alija Izetbegović for the first time to comprehend what was his influence, his significance, and why he's so precious to Bosnians, but not only Bosnians, I would say, to the contemporary Muslim thought in general. So as I said, I am going to read down my address, and inshallah, I hope that there will be a time that we will be together there or here in life. The contemporary world is marked by a sharp ideological conflict that has been going on for years and whose end is not in sight. We are all involved in this conflict in one way or another, either as its participants or as its victims. What is the place of Islam in this gigantic confrontation? Does it have any role in shaping today's world? This book attempts to answer that question, at least partially. I begin this short address with a sentence from the introduction to the book, Islam Between East and the West, which both then and now poses one of the key questions for Muslim thinkers and all those who take Islam as a guide in life. The thought expressed, the question that Alija Izetbegović posed, rings even more powerfully today than when it was first written down. The bipolar order that shaped his approach has ceased to exist, but the multipolar one is slowly becoming a reality that must be reckoned with, which emphasizes the need to define the role of Islam in it. Due to this multifaceted confrontation, relations have become more complex and subtle, and the world taking shape before our eyes in both troublesome and worrying. The role of Islam in a bipolarly divided world and the Cold War environment was great, but in the most significant aspect, it remained unrealized. Today, as in the near future, the role is becoming and will become even more pronounced, but the possibility that it will be neglected as it was during the 20th century remains a realistic scenario. However, a repetition of the 20th century lethargy of Islamic thought would be worse than humiliating. The Islamic idea has become crucial not only for defining one's own position, but also for the survival of a world in which humanity does not become a mere statistical entry or, to quote, quantified energy that produces guaranteed profit. Instead, it offers a vision of a being imbued with meaning in the fullness of his action and existence, a being of call and response, whose essence is fulfilled in the drama of existence. Therefore, within the dehumanizing rush of the Anthropocene era that humanity has built against itself, Islam provides both a teaching and an order capable of restoring the lost meaning of anthropos by re-establishing humanity as a unique presence within theocentric discourse. Yet, in this immense new confrontation, this role must first be accepted and then actively performed. In this work, Izetbegović reveals the return of reality's missing inner dimension of reality, a dimension linked to the drama of existence and the testimony of humanity's arrival from the unknown, by contrasting Michelangelo with Darwin. In doing so, he sharply contrasts art with science. He argues that art is most authentic. Art is the history of human alienation. This is precisely why science and art are in complete, irrevocable conflict regarding the origin and nature of humanity. Izetbegović claims that a science of humanity is possible only if man is viewed as a part or product of the external world, whereas art is possible only if man is distinct from nature, a stranger within it. For Izetbegović, however, being a stranger means being a true individual, that is, achieving and realizing the full capacity of the person. He emphasizes this sense of foreignness, viewing this inner dimension of reality as the conscious meaning of existence. For Izetbegović, therefore, this meaning is thoroughly reflected in the ultimate humanization of the individual. Through countless examples, often defying worldly logic, he shows how this state is achieved. I'm quoting, "Fighting for other people or for truth, justice, and goodness is always a negation of the narrowness and finitude of life. The sacrifices of those who lose their lives, freedom, and peace because they remain faithful to moral laws represent the most profound revelation of the infinity of life and its higher secondary meaning. These are sparks of light that, like a flash of lightning in the dark night, instantly illuminate distant horizons for us. This is one of the core convictions he expresses in his elaboration on what it means to become fully human. Reading Islam between East and West leads to the conclusion that Izetbegović's thought is provocative, yet primarily avant-garde. Unburdened by the traditional framework defined by the Ottoman and the post-Ottoman systems of Islamic scholarship, his thought transcends these limits, ascending to higher levels of theoretical reflection on Islam and its position in a divided world. He engages in dialogue with intellectual giants, seamlessly incorporating their thoughts and ideas into an explanatory framework that establishes his own argument. Izetbegović approached society, politics, culture, and all other topics from the position of an advocate building a system based on the Islamic worldview. This is why Islam between East and West is not a theological text. Izetbegović himself describes the book as not theology, nor its author a theologian. Rather, it is an attempt to translate Islam into a language spoken and understood by today's generation. This text is therefore a call for both individual intellectual sharpening and collective social action. The thought of Alija Izetbegović in general, and this book in particular, should serve as a guide for Muslim intellectuals navigating post-normal times, precisely because it validates the necessity of establishing an Islamic worldview. Izetbegović brilliantly anchors his arguments by placing humanity at the center of the world's drama. Across all the themes he explores, from the problem of justice and retribution to art as a spiritual flesh within the human soul, the human being remains a unique phenomenon whose actions strive toward the pure meaning of existence. Structurally, the book consists of two parts. It comprehensively analyzes the problem of religion on the one hand and the question of Islam from the perspective of bipolarity on the other. Yet, the human being remains the core, defining theme of the work. Izetbegović clearly demonstrates how materialists view man as a mere biological machine, arguing that the difference between humans and animals is only a matter of degree rather than quality, thereby denying the existence of a distinct human essence. To illustrate this point, he quotes Lukács, his book Existentialism or Marxism, claiming that there is only a concrete historical and social concept of man, and that economic and social history is the only one that is concrete and that really exists. He similarly highlights Ivan Pavlov, who believed that man, like all other natural systems, is subject to the inevitable and general laws of nature. Though these positions may seem self-evident to some, Izetbegović views them as a total negation of humanity because they entirely dismiss the inner dimension of human reality. Finally, by drawing one of the philosophical insights of Jacques Derrida, who positioned that there is no view from nowhere and consequently no entirely objective, unmediated knowledge, we can fully flesh out Izetbegović's overarching thesis. Objectivity does not emerge from a vacuum of perspective, nor is it possible to remain neutral when evaluating contrasting discourses. For Izetbegović, the Islamic worldview is an ontological reality. A conviction in its truth cannot be fulfilled by theoretical formulation alone. It is an operational force meant to subdue and guide the world in the name of God and for the ultimate good of humanity. Achieving this requires immense perseverance and devotion. As Izetbegović powerfully concludes in this final sentence of his work, "O submission, your name is Islam." Thank you for your time, and again, I really do hope that I will give small contribution to this event, and I really hope that a lot of people will read this masterpiece of the Islamic scholarship or Muslim thought in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. That was Dr. Edmir from Bosnia, the CEO of Aurora Foundation Sarajevo, and someone who took part in the war and was severely wounded. Just to let you know, on the screen, you'll see a slide where Dr. Edmir's speech will be available to download from the Cordoba Foundation website. There should be a slide coming up with the QR code. Tech team, can we get it up? We'll just wait for them for a few seconds. Maybe not. There it is. So if you scan this QR code, you can download the article. It's available at the Cordoba Foundation website, thecordobafoundation.com, or just scan the QR code. We'll have the full speech available. Inshallah, up next, well, before I do, are people at the back okay? People are still standing. If there are any chairs in the front, please try to fill in the chairs in the front of you. Okay, our next speaker, who's been to Cambridge Mosque? Oh, mashallah. So from the beautiful eco Cambridge Mosque, we have our next speaker is Sheikh Professor Abdul Hakim Murad. He is the visionary behind that extravagant mosque where when you go, you feel like you're in Turkey or in the Middle East somewhere. He's the chairman, the visionary, but more importantly, he is a prominent Islamic scholar, a theologian, and the dean of the Cambridge Muslim College. He doesn't need further introduction, everyone knows him. So it's my huge pleasure to present to you Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad to share a few words.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Not entirely sure what right I have to speak about the late Bosnian president, since I never had the good fortune of meeting him, although I did see him from a distance at the 1992 London conference. My companionship with him, discipleship perhaps, nonetheless has been real over the years, partly through this book and partly through his personal charisma and exemplary leadership. My interest really began, it was 1983, 1984, when I wrote a report for Amnesty International, who at the time were thinking of adopting him and the other members of the Sarajevo 13 defendants as prisoners of conscience. And before they did that, they wanted to make sure that they weren't promoting people who actually did turn out to be, as the League of Communists were saying, dangerous, theocratic, fundamentalist maniacs. That would have been slightly embarrassing. So I wrote this report for them and went out to Sarajevo, not knowing much about Islam in the Balkans or the region generally, and kind of gently fell in love with that rather wistful, melancholic, the Ottomans used to call it huzn. There's a certain sorrow, nostalgia about places that are perhaps have seen better days. And I was able to meet some people who knew him and knew members of the group and put together a kind of report, although since I didn't know and still don't know, to my regret, the Bosnian language, I fear it probably wasn't very good. But the lesson I learned when I went with this report to the Amnesty offices was that all of them, meticulous left-wing liberals, very well-meaning, were very conflicted about Islam. They didn't understand Bosnia. How could these people be religious Muslims? What did they think about women's rights? What did they think about what we now call LGBTQ? What did they think about chopping off the hands of robbers? What did they think about Khomeini? This was the kind of very primitive discourse that they were firing at me. And that, I think, represents part of Bosnia's tragedy, that Europe has seen itself as this enlightened place, but at the same time has this blind spot when it comes to anything that looks like Islam and Muslims. And that probably was the reason why the president was looking so distressed when I briefly saw him at the London conference, because he was combating this tension in the European mind between what you might call cultural truths, what they know to be correct in their culture, and factual truths. The Bosnian reality was that the good guys were the Muslims and the bad guys were the Christians, and that paralyzed them. They could not respond. I went to see my MP at the time, who was a cabinet minister, and I said, look, all of these agencies are saying this is genocide, genocide, genocide. We need to lift the arms embargo. We need to hit the Serbs. We need to allow the Bosnians to defend themselves. And he said, they may not be good Muslims now, but one day they might be. And we have to remember who we are. And I think he let slip in an unguarded sort of MP's sort of workshop meeting a deep truth, which was why the West was paralyzed. It was because of their Muslimness and the fear of this contamination in the pure Christianity of Central Europe. So the Bosnian struggle was not just a military struggle, but was against this European determination to defend a cultural truth rather than a factual truth. And we see this today in the situation in Gaza. So many hand-wringing politicians who've read the reports about the genocide and they know what's going on, but it's not their cultural truth. It's not what they want to be happening, and so they're paralyzed. And so you have a very similar paralysis and kind of spectator mindset. We hope things will get better. This was in the churches as well. I tried to arrange a meeting between Mustafa Teric, who at the time was the very outspoken, heroic Mufti of Bosnia, with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Carey. And Carey said, no, we don't want to talk to Bosnian Muslims. So I asked their interfaith advisor why. This is the biggest thing that's happened in Europe since the Holocaust, and doesn't he want to at least listen? He said, it might annoy the Orthodox churches with whom we have a good relationship. And we know this is important to the Serbian church and important to the Greek church, which has awarded a medal to Radovan Karadzic. And we don't really want to rock the ecumenical boat. So it wouldn't be appropriate for him to be granting an audience to a Bosnian Muslim leader. So that's another example. They knew what was happening. They knew the facts, but there was a cultural truth, pure, innocent Christendom, which they couldn't depart from. Another thing that I learned in my kind of rather belated figuring out of this aspect of the European mindset, which had catastrophic consequences for the Bosnian people, was that Bosnia is just one instance. If you look at the history of Islam in Europe, you see that Bosnia is simply the most recent instantiation of a horrific process that goes back centuries. And again, Europe tends to forget. Muslims don't. But maybe some of you remember when Putin was arranging the Olympics in Sochi on the Black Sea. And the Circassian community around the world said, don't put the main stadium on the mass grave. That's our grandparents. And the journalists here said, well, who are Circassians? That's very strange. Was there a genocide? We don't know. The Muslim world knows. My son-in-law is of Circassian extraction. Muslim worlds know what happened to them. The biggest genocide in Europe in the 19th century, 80% of the Circassians killed in cold blood under the baleful gaze of the priests. Difficult. Not a cultural truth. Factual truth. It's recorded. The Russians recorded what they did, but it's not a cultural truth, and so we don't really know about that, and it's all a bit awkward. And it's not in the history books for most Westerners. It's difficult. Difficult. It's the wrong history. And so it goes on. Who now remembers in the West that Crimea was once a Muslim country? They've forgotten about that. I was hiking in Crimea once with my kids before the Russian invasion. Beautiful, beautiful place. And we went to the old Mevlevi Tekke, which was famous in the times of the Khans of Crimea, the Giray family. And it's a ruin now. We asked the little Russian lady who was there what happened to the dervishes and the sheikhs and the librarian and what happened to this place. And she said, oh, the Russians came and they killed all the dervishes and the sheikh and they put them in the well, and we think they're still there. That's the story of Islam in Crimea. And some of the survivors try to come back, but the European mind looking at Ukraine now doesn't know that deeper history. They can't. Factual truth, not a cultural truth. The city of Odessa. Who remembers in the West that was once the great Muslim city of Haji Bey? That's what it was called. In the province of Özye, the city of apple orchards and poets and Turkish baths, and a great place by all accounts. And what happened to them? Women and children present. I won't tell you what happened to the Muslims of Haji Bey and how it became Odessa. There's a whole story. Bosnia, just the latest episode in that gruesome story. And many of the techniques are similar. Impalements, kind of ritualized mass rapes, crucifixions, forced baptisms, people having crosses carved in their chest. The same thing Bosnian refugees were reporting and were normal as part of the systematic process of cleansing in Bosnia. They happened across Central Europe, Southeastern Europe, the Black Sea coast. It's the same pattern. So that was another rather sobering reminder. And I think it's useful for us now to think about this. Why? Because Muslim communities across Europe now are witnessing the storm clouds gathering on the horizons as the most powerful opposition party in almost every European democracy now is the far right, with the exception of those countries where they're actually in power. And many of those same rhetorical themes are there. Muslims are barbarians, and we Europeans are nice and peaceful and lovely and Christian. And why are they such barbarians? That's the same rhetoric. They don't fit in. They don't want to be European. They treat their women badly, etc., etc., etc. Same old rhetoric. And it's coming this way. Maybe at the next election, the Muslim question will be the most hotly debated topic. Bosnians can teach us about what that is like and how to avert it by all means possible. And one thing that we need to do is to be able to stand up to that rhetoric, to say, Europe has this dark history. It has its positive aspects, but it has its really scary history. And we need to remember that over the last 100 years, only 1% of violent deaths worldwide were the work of Muslims. Barely 1%. And yet Europe had its First World War, and its Second World War, and its Holocaust, and its Stalin's purges, and the horrors of the Balkans. And yet they're the ones who say they are peaceful, and Muslims are dangerous and violent and don't belong here. It doesn't take much study of history to realize that boot really is on the other foot, and that we have more to be proud of as Muslims than they want us to have. So we need to challenge their cultural truths with the factual truths. We need to rub their noses in the horrors of Srebrenica and Bosnia and the deeper history. We need to arm ourselves with information so that we win those debates, so that the moderate, reasonable mainstream across Europe are swayed, but not by the demonizers and the maniacs and the divisive people, the religious fanatics, but by people who want human beings to get on and recognize that the Muslim presence, the largest minority in every European country now, is here to stay and is indispensable and has an honorable and peaceable tradition. And also in Europe, a tradition of martyrdom and heroism. And somebody like Izetbegović is really somebody who should be exemplary and pointed to as an example of somebody who, in the face of Christian mania, and it is mania. I'm going to stop soon. Last year, I was at a conference in Bosnia about Muslim literatures of the Virgin Mary. Beautiful, very peaceful. We went to the big Marian shrine, a big Catholic center of Medjugorje, Herzegovina. Not one of the priests wanted to meet us. No, we don't meet with Muslims. No, 13 priests resident. They didn't want to meet any Muslims, certainly not. So we talked to a sociologist who was allowed to talk to us. And we told this sociologist who was telling us, Medjugorje is the shrine of the Virgin who is the Queen of Peace. The Queen of Peace. So he said, I went to Medjugorje during the war, and in every single little shop they were selling Nazi regalia. And in the police station they had a picture of Ante Pavlic, who was Hitler's quisling ruler of Croatia during the Second World War. And the clergy were actively involved in the destruction of the mosques. What did the Queen of Peace, who has an oracle every day, have to say about that? There's a village, a Muslim village, a mile from Medjugorje, which was brutally cleansed. What did the Queen of Peace say about that? Well, you can't even talk to the priests. They don't want to hear from Muslims. So, yeah, that has to be said. We have to be aware of that. We have to know this dark history of Europe. And we have to just know. We need to go to Bosnia. We need to read this great literature. We need to make that history part of our history. It's a matter of self-defense. And inshallah, I'm optimistic with the new generation who do read and are interested and want to be European in the best way, that we're going to have enough people to defend ourselves from the storm clouds that are heading our way. The Bosnians have shown us how to defend ourselves, and inshallah, we will be able to achieve it as well. One last thing, inshallah, buy the book. Remember also, we're Muslims. The president has gone on to his, no doubt, considerable eternal reward. And we should recite Fatiha for him, and we should also make dua for him once we've bought the book and are reading the book, inshallah, because we know from the Sunnah that this benefits the souls of the departed. May Allah reward you all and protect you all and protect the people of Bosnia. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Abdul Hakim, for those beautiful words of wisdom, as well as a call to action to learn the lessons from Bosnia and Srebrenica. he referenced the words storm clouds. We can see very visibly in the UK recently what's happened in Belfast and Northern Ireland, where there are literally pogroms. Families are being forced out of their houses because they've been attacked. They've been firebombed. Mosques have been attacked in East London and elsewhere. So all this starts off with us and them, hatred, discrimination, dehumanizing, and effectively mass killings and genocide. This is all part of the 10 steps to genocide that's happening across the world, whether we talk about Gaza or Srebrenica or other places. So we need to really take lessons. And as Sheikh Abdul Hakim said, we can't just read the book and stay, do nothing. We need to do something about it, and not least make dua, inshallah, for Alija Izetbegović. Thank you so much. Next, we have a short video from Sheikh Yasser Qadi, who is not able to join us because he's on a flight right now. He is an American scholar, a theologian, and an author. I think many of you know him very well. So we'll view a quick video from Sheikh Yasser Qadi, and thereafter we will have Sister Sarah Joseph just joined us, hot foot all the way from Cardiff. This marathon trip. Thank you for taking the time to come, Sarah. But let's watch the video now. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your brother in Islam, Yasser Qadi. We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending his salat and salam upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. First and foremost, my apologies about the poor quality of the video. I'm actually sitting in a small room very far away from my home. And I'm just using my laptop computer to send you a message. So apologies about the lighting and the quality. But what is important, inshallah ta'ala, is the content and the reason why all of us have gathered today to commemorate the publication of a very, very historic book. And that is Alija Izetbegović's book, Islam Between East and West. Actually, this book, I have a personal journey with it as well. It was perhaps the first book that I read that I would consider to be a book of modern Islamic philosophy. I was probably 15, 16 years old. This is 1990 or so. And I read this book twice, once before the Bosnian conflict and once after. And I'll be honest, the first time I read it, I didn't fully understand the content of the book because frankly, it was too deep for me at that age. But I remember understanding one key point about that book. And that is that this author, who's I didn't know much about, I just knew that he was a very important politician in a land that I wasn't familiar with at the time, a European Muslim. The main takeaway I remember vividly was the feeling of pride of being a Muslim and wanting to achieve both civilizational and religious success. That was a sentiment that I had not yet been exposed to in the other readings and the other lectures that I had attended as a teenager. The notion of deen and dunya, the notion of being the best that you can. And frankly, that is really, I would say, the central message of his book, that Islam is that perfect synthesis, that harmony between materialism and spiritualism. It is the synthesis of the earthly and the heavenly. That's one of the main points that our Ustad Alija constantly makes, and that is that man is literally the child of the earth and the heaven. And thus the foundation of ethics, politics, education, building of civilization, it should always take place taking into account both the vertical and the horizontal. And one of the key points I think that he makes is the notion that Islam unites between beneficial knowledge and between useful action. And that is that for some people, Islam is primarily just about rituals, and for others is primarily about just doing something for the dunya. But what we read in the book is that what you need to do really is to combine between your ibadah and your mu'amalat to make the best of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. As he mentions in the book, that Islam does not separate between the mosque and the marketplace. And I would venture that this book is one of the few genuinely unique philosophical contributions of the Muslim Ummah in this century. And it really comes under a similar vein as maybe Allama Iqbal's, reconstruction of Islamic thought. It's one of those classics that truly transcends the East and West dichotomy. And what makes this book especially unique, especially important, is not just the message, but rather that it is coming from somebody who paid a personal price for what he wrote. He was jailed. He had a lot of opposition in his life. And it's coming from somebody who has experience. One of the biggest challenges that I find in the space that I inhabit is that too often people like myself, and I'll be the first to admit this, we don't have the types of experiences that people like Ustad Alija did, which is that he was an actual politician. He played the game of politics and mastered it. And yes, in his other books, he mentions that, there's certain things he had to do, he didn't like, he had to do them. But that's the reality of politics, right? The fact of the matter is that somebody like Ustad Alija is coming from a place of knowledge, a place of experience, a place of wisdom. He's not a mere armchair critic, which I would say many of us are of our time frame. He's not just, pontificating. He's not just speaking in platitudes. He has been there and done that. He's lived the life of an actual bona fide leader, somebody who's had to navigate his nation and his people through a civil war. And while, of course, the book was written, before that war took place, it's an opening into the mind of such a person. And frankly, I would say the book actually anticipated, many of the contemporary critiques that we have of modernity, the challenges that we are facing. And of course, somebody like Ustad Alija, he is speaking across intellectual, traditions. He's somebody who's born and raised in Europe, and yet he has a deep Islamic heritage. And that's why, you find references to the great philosophers on both sides of the aisle. So I would say that this book truly should be mandatory reading for all movers and shakers, for all people who want to traverse the path of intellectual scholarship, especially in the Western world. Because this is a book that is historically important, not just because of the arguments that it is making, but also because it is trying to synthesize an Islamic philosophy of humanity. It's not a book that can be categorized as Islamic theology or Islamic fiqh or Islamic adab. Rather, what this book really does is to answer the question, what vision of the human person makes Islam intelligible? What does Islam want of us as an ummah? And this is a question that few have dared to ask, even fewer have dared to write about, and even fewer were as qualified as our Ustad Alija when he wrote this book. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant him the highest place in Jannah, and to make this book and all of his other books a sadaqah jariyah. And I'm happy that attention is being paid once again to this book. And while it has been a long time since I have perused it, but because of this, inshallah ta'ala, we'll go back to it one more time as well, and inshallah skim through it and find even more benefit, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless all of you and all of us in our endeavors, and to allow us to be of those who follow in the legacy of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa
Wa alaikum assalam. That was Sheikh Yasir Qadi. He sent us the video because he can't be physically with us. As always, he's captured the overview of the book and the key messages. I hope those of us who read the book in the 80s and 90s, like Sheikh Yasir did, let's try and read it again once more, try to contextualize it. I think the book is very relevant for us today, given what is happening across the world, the conflicts and the trials. I think the book will really help us to navigate our situation. Thank you so much, Sheikh Yasir Qadi, and God bless you for all your endeavors. Our next speaker is Sarah Joseph. Sarah is a writer, a broadcaster, and the founding editor of ML Magazine. I'm sure a lot of you know ML Magazine. Sarah is just coming from Cardiff. It's been a marathon trip for her by several trains. And at one point she wanted to cancel, but I said she needs to be here. And alhamdulillah, she's here in person. A warm welcome to Sarah Joseph, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I begin in the name of God, the most merciful, the most kind. I greet you with a greeting of peace and mercy from your Lord. Assalamu alaikum. I didn't want to cancel, it's just the train wasn't moving. So the book, Islam Between East and West, a reflection on civilization, consciousness, and the human future. So I was, yes, just in Cardiff. And I was there because I was there for a week-long summer school on the art and science of uncertainty and the future. And it was run by Cardiff Business School and the Data Lab for Social Good. And the cohort that were there were data scientists and forecasters and statisticians and engineers. But there were also people in fields such as sociology, psychology, architects and educators, and me with my sort of theological religious studies background. Anyway, the opening keynote, he says, the best forecasters don't have a world view. And I looked at him, and he's very, very senior, very, very senior. And I thought, well, I've got a world view, so is this going to be a problem? This is like the opening keynote. And then I thought, hold on a minute. Whether you accept it or not, whether you realize it or not, everyone has a worldview. We're just culturalized to think that our worldview is just the norm, and we don't recognize sometimes that it's, a worldview. And it was this kind of idea that maths and science were pure, unbiased, away from this sort of messy social sciences. And then there were social sciences who wanted to emulate this pure science, as if that's even possible. But data, the numbers, is full of biases, and scientists are full of biases. And why do I say all of this? Because we make constant decisions which are reflective of our world. Even mathematicians are making constant decisions which are reflective of their world, which have impacts on us, and particularly in the age of AI and the algorithms. And you look at this book, and I've been reading it. Yes, like many here, I read it in the 90s, or perhaps even probably the early 90s. And it was written between 1960 and 1980, in a time when the author, Alija Izetbegović, was living under communism, finally published in 1984. And I just want to take out a few moments from the book. And the first I'll begin is a chapter which he calls Progress Against Human. And it reflects from 1900 to 1960. And he says, the living standards in these countries have increased fivefold since 1800 and are projected to quintuple again in 60 years. After such an optimistic vision, the question remains, will life be 5 times fuller, happier, or more humane? And so he's asking this question somewhere in the 1960s and 1980s between that, and he answers, the answer is decidedly negative, and then launches a number of pages of terrible statistics. And I was thinking, well, think about the time that's passed since this was written, 1960 to 1980, where it's another 40 or 60 years. Have we quintupled in our happiness? And I think, again, the answer is decidedly no. And then he goes on, he says, contrary to the materialistic view, civilization and comfort do not suit human nature. Just think about that for a minute. Contrary to the materialistic view, civilization and comfort do not suit human nature. Asking ourselves, that maybe that difficulty, maybe that trial is making us be something. And I always think about that when I think about the creation of human beings, why God created us, this being that even the angels asked about. But there's something in toil, something in difficulty, there's something in failing and getting back up, in making mistakes and repenting, as Adam alayhi salam did, that makes us special as human beings, that forces us to grow. Quran talks about how we've created you of the best of nations and reduced you to the lowest of the low, bar those who believe and do good works, bar those who grow, in another verse. But he asks Alija Izetbegović, how do we save ourselves from this progress? And I always think about this in relation to a couple of things. So one, when I was talking to a Malaysian minister and I was talking about the deforestation that was taking place in Malaysia at the time, and he was saying, are we not to have progress? And I was saying, brother, the destruction of your biodiversity is not progress. And I think it is in relation to my husband. He always would talk about in his village in Bangladesh, they would serve food on banana leaves. And of course, now we have all of this plastic and it's, forever plastics in the environment because that was progress. And now we're going back to saying, should we use such materials as banana leaf perhaps for our disposable things? So where is the progress if we're not thinking potentially or living within nature? And so in the book, the introduction by Ibrahim Musa, he actually mentions, as Yasser Kardi mentions, Iqbal and the reconstruction, and one of Iqbal's books. And he quotes, and he says, Iqbal says, to rethink the whole system of Islam without completely breaking with the past. What a challenge that is. That idea that we're moving between the past and we're moving in the future, we're existing in the present, and this journey in this temporal line between what can we learn from the past, what are we envisaging of the future, what is progress? Potentially progress is not this technological progress, the technological solutionism. We're trying to solve AI, we're trying to solve climate change using AI, which is destructive of the climate. And in a sense, the messaging we're getting in this book is to look at these questions, is to look, as he says, between the material and the spiritual, and recognize that duality is who we are, it's what we are, we can't escape it. He writes, both religion and utopia become distorted when they enter practical life, when and if they become actual life practices. Their pure and consistent forms exist only within books. We can always write these theoretical ideas in a book, but then, as the battle plan says, it says when you write a battle plan, it exists until it makes first contact with the enemy. But that's the same for any plan. We write a theory, we write it in the book, it sounds all wonderful, and then we go into reality. But Islam is not like that. It's practical. And he carries on. In real human practice, religion becomes naturalized. It accepts certain elements of humanity's lower animalistic nature. Conversely, utopia becomes humanized, acquiring moral characteristics. And this, I find, is the strength of this book. It's this discussing between the material and the spiritual. Perhaps for me, certainly as a youngster, certainly when I read this book the very first time around, the standout concept then, and it still lives with me to this day, is he talks about the here and now, and he's looking at history. And he says, there are two histories of Islam. I think this is absolutely fundamental. As Muslims, we understand this, because sometimes people say, well, when did Islam begin? We're 1,500 years old. 1,500, oh yeah, Islam's 1,500 years. We read these books on religion, or it began in, whatever, 500. He says, there are two histories of Islam. One before and one after Muhammad, peace be upon him. The history of Islam after Muhammad, in the narrow sense, cannot be fully understood without the prehistory of Islam, without the Islam since the beginning of time. Guy Eaton writes something very similar in, I think, Islam and the Destiny of Man, when he talks about the beginning of the history from Adam alayhi salam. I think, why is this important? I think it's important because as we approach the sources, the materials, we do so in a manner which is often very, very narrow. When I was at the conference, one of the things I was calling for was that we look at the problems that we're facing in the world through a 360, so that we're looking through we're looking with multidisciplinary teams and a 360 approach at all of our problems. When we're imagining our future, we take it from every angle, from every specialism, because our problems are so complex that one specialism in and of itself, data science can't do it by itself, philosophy can't do it by itself, law can't do it by itself. But if we're going to look at the problems, then we look at them from a 360 perspective. And I think that that's the same from the methodological lens through which we examine our own sources, and why it's so important that we recognize that All of human history comes under the elements or the banner of Islam, just in the same way that an ayah, the word for a verse of the Quran, and an ayah, a sign within revelation, within the sciences, within our capacity to see, is the same word. A sign and a verse is the same word. It's ayah. It's important to understand that all knowledge is Allah's, and knowledge is the lost property of the believer. And as we face polycrises is a word which you'll see out there in the world right now, but it's basically that we are facing so many crises all at once. Once upon a time, we may have had one crisis or two. Maybe in the Bosnia situation, they would have considered that their crisis was that war. But at the moment, what we're facing now is these polycrises. They're all over there and almost unmanageable to the human mind. As an example, the climate emergency, AI, the socioeconomic inequalities, all of these are coming to us all at once. And we have choices ahead of us right now. We have choices to become victims, actually. We have choices to think, oh my God, the rising of the far right, it's, we're facing a potential Bosnia in Britain, where we can clamp down, we can hide away, we can get smaller, we can get angry. But actually, I don't think that that's what this book is calling us to. This book is calling us towards civilization. This book is calling us to say, we are not victims. We are people inspired by ideas. We are inspired by the Quran and the life of the Prophet ﷺ, and all history belongs to us. And we can look at through a civilizational lens, and we can have our worldview, and our worldview has meaning and importance in the world that we live today. It's calling upon us to not be a victim, to not be scared, but to say we have a vision for the future, that we have a sense of what the human future could and potentially even should look like. What is the potential, and what do we have to say? We have a vision for the 21st century. Barbara Adam, one of the people that came to the conference, she talked about the temporal reach of our actions. That means that what we do now has ripples for the future. And she talked about our responsibility to distant beings. You think that is such an Islamic message. Our responsibility to what we do now to ripple throughout time. That we have this opportunity to not be scared. We have an opportunity to cultivate a vision, as Alija Izetbegović cultivated a vision. And so my call today is really to be that, to be the best of what we can be, to work out whatever we can, whatever our strengths are, whatever our lens is, whatever our field is, to apply that to the polycrisis of the world today, and to do so in a manner which is confident and for the good of all, because the Prophet ﷺ did not come for the Muslims. He came as a mercy to mankind, as a mercy, not as a vengeance, not as a fear, not as a penalty, as a mercy, not to the Quraysh, not to the Muslims, to the whole of mankind. And that is a civilizational message, and that's what this book tells us. And inshallah, that's what we should encapsulate. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Sarah Joseph. Message of hope. I think that's what I take from her speech. And I think that should really resonate in the room. Despite our challenges, we should always believe and work for hope, inshallah. Our next speaker, if I may ask, if you can be brief as possible, we want to allow a few questions at the end. We may run by 10 minutes than scheduled, so just please bear with us. Our next speaker is Dr. Muhammad Wajid Akhtar. He's the Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain. Over to Dr. Wajid.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam wa shukran anbiya muslimin nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam wa alayhi tasliman jami'an kathira. I'm not going to talk to you about the book. I want to talk to you about who this person was to me, and hopefully to you, inshallah. Umar radiallahu anhu was sitting with the Sahaba when he was Khalifa, and he told them, wish. And one of them said, I wish that this room was full of gold so I could spend it in the path of Allah. Umar radiallahu anhu was clearly unhappy with this. So he said, wish. So another person thought that he was getting what Umar Anhu was trying to hint at, and he said, well, I wish that this room was full of diamonds and jewels, so I could spend it in the path of Allah and in charity. Umar Anhu still looked displeased, and he said, wish. And so the people looked at him and they said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, we don't know what to wish for. And he said, I wish this room was full of people like Abu Ubaidah and Abu Jarrah radiallahu anhu. Umar Anhu was teaching us that the greatest wealth that a people can have is good leaders. The Muslim Ummah today has oil beneath its feet, has gold in its ground, has more than 1 billion or 2 billion, depending on whatever statistics you take, from Malaysia to Morocco, but we have very few good leaders. And it's important for us to understand that this is why this book is important. The Prophet ﷺ said words to the effect that the Imam, the leader, is a shield for the Muslims. Without it, you are going to be attacked on all sides. The hadith goes on, but the Imam is a shield for the Muslims. Where is our Imam today? Where are our leaders? You see, there are few examples in the world, and wherever they are, if the people follow them and if the people support them, those countries, those groups, they prosper. And everywhere else, they fall into destruction and despair. What is the difference between some of the Muslim countries today that tried to overthrow tyranny and others that successfully did? Good leadership. Alija Izetbegović had 3 things that every leader needs. Number 1, he had a vision. When I was a child in Saudi growing up, and the genocide in Bosnia was going on, there was no internet, there was no social media, so you just feel upset watching what's on TV. And in my mosque, there were 2 books in English. Everything else was in Arabic. One was the entire Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, and the other was this book. So I read it. And the Imam, he came to me one day and he said, you know, this is why the Bosnians will win. So this was at the height of the genocide. I said, why? And he said, because you cannot kill an idea, you can only kill people. In this book is the idea of a civilization, idea of a people that combined modernity and tradition, idea of a civilization that combines principle and pragmatism, idea of a civilization that is comfortable between East and West. In this is the secret of success, believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and having a vision. A leader who has a vision is so much greater than anything that you can imagine. All the oil, all the gold, all the weapons, all the armies of the world fall beneath that, because you cannot destroy or defeat or kill a vision. The other thing he had, he was a warrior. He didn't choose to be. But when the time came, he stood up. As Tipu Sultan, the great freedom fighter in India, once said, it is better to live one day as a lion than 1,000 years as a jackal. Alija Izetbegović and his companions decided to live like lions. And they endured the longest siege in modern history in Sarajevo. And they did it like men and women with faith would do. And finally, he was a leader who understood what it meant to be pragmatic. When it was time, when the war was over, he did not seek vengeance. Because vengeance, as Salah ad-Din once said, spilt blood never sleeps. He did not seek vengeance. He did not seek to have 100%. He was not happy with the Dayton Accords. He said it 100 times, but this is better than the continuation of the war for my people. He was pragmatic. And then he did something that very, very few Muslim leaders ever do. He decided to step down. Traditionally, throughout 1,400 years of Muslim history, Muslim leaders only leave office when they're on their way to the graveyard. He decided to leave before. This shows you the measure of the man. I'll finish with this last quote from Napoleon. Napoleon once said, somebody asked him, you know, this one guy, Napoleon, wasn't actually French, if you know that, right? Napoleon wasn't actually French. He was born in Corsica, so he spoke with an accent. And
Field because I can't make the Bradford event this Sunday. So I really want to thank the whole panel, but especially Auntie Sabina. I have to call you Auntie. That's from my culture. And I do feel that your father was my spiritual grandfather, whom inspired me to be a political activist in my local area as well. But my question, so as Dr. Wajid alluded onto the qualities of a leader, you have first-hand experience seeing how he was in those days when he would come home maybe, or did he ever come home? What was his temperament like in dealing with all that situation? And maybe that could be the greatest advice for anyone in this room who wants to be a leader.
Thank you so much. We'll go to the question at the back of the hall. Sister at the back, right at the back near the door.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for all the amazing speeches. Big fan of you all. My question is, what keeps you hopeful? I think in this era of polycrises, it's easy to want to give up. So yeah, what keeps you hopeful in your plights to make things better?
Thank you. Short and brief. Any other questions from this side? Can someone run to the front here? Front row, please. We'll just take maybe two more and that's it. We'll ask the panel to answer.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah for enlightening us. And of course, I pray for President Alija Izetbegović. May Allah elevate his status in Jannah. So my question to you, as Dr. Murad said, that far-right politicians are rising in every European countries almost. Either they are like close to the government or opposition party. So my question to you, is that not an opportunity to spread the beauty of Islam to them? And can we not see it as an opportunity to spread the beauty of Islam?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there one more question from the middle somewhere? Any young people in the room? Look at this. I can see one young person there in the middle.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Jazakallah khair. Should I stand up?
Yes, please. Say your name.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mehdi. I actually came from university today. I'm the current Vice President for Education, Arts and Sciences at KCL Students Union. I had a question actually in regards to what Dr. Wajid was saying about leaders, right? What would you say makes up a young person? What actions or traits could a young person embody today that will make them a leader of the Muslim Ummah or help them lead tomorrow? Because a lot of the time we see that young people are put to the sideline or taken as a token when we are actually people who are actively trying to make change in our institutions or in any means that we can. So what's something that you would say that a young person should embody in order to make those changes? Or what's something that you guys as the older generation could do to encompass young people or empower young people more as opposed to just being a token by the sideline?
Thank you. Thank you so much. One last question. Anyone else? In the middle, just there. Third row from the back or fourth row. That's it.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fahad and I'm from Pakistan. So I'm also going through a very subjective personal journey about this book, and I read this around 2 years back. And right now, I think I read a few verses in the introductory paragraph, and in the revised version, they've added a few paragraphs from Alama Iqbal.
If you could come to your question because of time, sorry.
Yeah, so my question is very similar to the first one. How important is leadership in the modern Muslim world? Because there is a great deficit in the whole lot at this point of time. They're very similar.
Great, thank you so much. So what I'll do, I'll ask each of the speakers to respond in 1 or 2 minutes, respond to all the questions. The question about your father's temperament, maybe you can answer that first, Auntie Sabina, and then about giving hope in young people. I think all the panelists can answer that question. And I think with that comes women, the role of women also, and what makes a good leader, and also to deal with the threat of the far right. How do we respond? Can we do more than just being angry? So let's start with you, Sabina, about your father and his temperament.
Very briefly. I think that he had this kind of a combination of strength. That's what I have witnessed on many occasions, because that was obvious. But I analyze him now, you know, in hindsight. I remember how, even with us kids, he was at the same time very patient and very strong. And later on, I could see that throughout his life, especially during the war, when he forced himself to keep patience while still being a strong leader. And those two do not exclude each other. So those two qualities, in a way, are compatible as far as I can see. So that would be just a brief answer. Even in the most difficult moments, he kept his strength and his patience. I believe that it had to do with his faith, probably.
Thank you. So, Sheikh Abdul Hakim, so do you want to respond to the other questions about the need to respond to the far right, but how do we respond in young leadership?
It can help to look, say, at some of the descriptions of their own journeys. J.D. Vance, the American vice president, just published a kind of spiritual autobiography in which he says one of the triggers for his conversion to Catholicism was his encounters with Islam in Iraq, because he fought in the Iraq war, and seeing women in hijab reading Quran, and that made him question his identity because he was so impressed by these people. But obviously the mosques in America and the mosques around the world are not really gearing up for da'wah and don't really have a discourse that is accessible to people like that. A book like this might well be a useful point of access for them. But most of our mosques, those people came to these countries for dunya, and the first hadith in Bukhari is whoever migrates for dunya, basically dunya will get him. If you migrate for Allah and his messenger, you will get Allah and his messenger. So we need a niyyah reset, and that will completely change the atmosphere, because people are coming to Islam. And as the questioner suggested, sometimes the rise of these forms of anti-Muslim mania makes people think about Islam and take it more seriously. Just one anecdote. On the day of the Southport riots in our mosque in Cambridge, the police said, we're keeping an eye on you. We suggest you have full-time security. Keep an eye on people coming and going. I was there at the entrance to the mosque, and this English skinhead comes in, tattoos, piercings, looking quite rough. And he didn't look as if he was at home, and he's looking around. And we thought, shall we escort him from the premises? But he came over to the information desk and he said, I want to convert to Islam, please. So don't underestimate anybody. The Sheikh say, anybody that you meet, imagine it could be Al-Khidr. It's not them and us. It's people who have responded to the call and people who should be given the call. And so many people are coming to Islam at the moment, and every mosque should have a da'wah committee. Every mosque should see its reason for existence in England being to call the local people to Islam. People are, as Vance says in his book, really desperate for some serious religion, not some hyper up-to-date, woke, diluted nonsense, just another way of being modern, but a genuine focus on conservatism, on neighborhood, on family, on tradition, on respect for the elderly, on belief in God. That's what human beings crave, and we should be sharing that with our neighbors. And most of our mosques will face a hard reckoning on the Yom al-Qiyamah because they're not doing that. Allah will call them to account.
Thank you so much. Because of the time, Sarah, just maybe 30 seconds, quick response if you can.
On the far right.
Or the other issues.
What keeps me hopeful is that hope is the quality of the believer. Iblis comes from the word ablasa, to despair. So the notion of despair is the quality of Iblis. So hope is the quality of a believer. So even when I really feel very far from hopeful, I have to remember that that is the quality of Iman. And so we must remain hopeful. And everything and all power belongs to Allah. In relation to the far right rising, yes, there are malign actors, these billionaires who are funding hate, etc. And those malign actors, with the algorithms and et cetera, et cetera. But I think also there's just a lot of good people that are feeling that they themselves have been tremendously ill-treated by successive generations of governments. And we actually have a message of hope to deliver to them. And we'll be surprised how they may turn and their hearts may turn, because all hearts are with and guidance is from Allah. And you think after 9/11 and during the Gaza situation, so many people have embraced Islam in these moments, in these times. And we have to do the work, as we have to do the work to show that Islam is a vision and it's beautiful. In relation to leadership and decision making, and the brother was there, what are the qualities? I think just look at Surah Asr, for nothing else. You know, that human beings, we're lost, except for those who believe, those who do good works, those who call one another to truth, and those one another to patience, perseverance. And so it's a collective action, this working together to call one another to truth. Baroness O'Neill said in the Wreath lecture, when we was talking about trustworthiness, it's not just a question of being appearing trustworthy, it's a question of being trustworthy. So it's a question of not just appearing truthful, but being truthful. And we call one another, so it's about working together. We can't just be by ourselves. Leadership is not a lone sport. I think that was it. 30 seconds.
That's fine. Thank you. We'll cap it there. Thank you so much. Because of time, I'm going to round up now. First of all, thank you all for coming, especially Sabina for taking the trouble to be with us tonight. You've been a real light here. People really feel the warmth of your presence here. And we hope everyone will take a copy of the book today and learn the lessons. Also, the other panelists, Dr. Wajid, Sheikh Abdul Hakim, Sarah Joseph, the ambassador, and our guests joining online. Thank you all for coming and sharing your wisdom and experiences. And the audience, of course, you've braved the heat to come here and stay for 2 hours. I hope you found it useful and beneficial knowledge from everyone. Let me conclude by saying tomorrow is an important day for the Bosnian Muslims and the world over. Tomorrow, after 31 years, 10 more Muslim bodies have been identified through DNA, and they have been returned to their families. And tomorrow, they'll be buried. A janazah will be given to them tomorrow in Srebrenica and Potocari. And their names are very important for us to remember and know. On the screen, you can see the names. These 10 people were killed, massacred, and basically put in mass graves, and they'll be buried tomorrow. Their names are Senad, Moriz, Hamed, and more. You can read on the screen. We'll just pause for 1 minute for the adhan, inshallah.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله
as I was saying, tomorrow 10 bodies of Bosniak Muslims will be buried in Srebrenica, and their names are on the screen. You can download the names from the Cordoba Foundation website later on. It's important that we remember them, that after 31 years, families are still finding bodies. Imagine the anguish and the pain. This is happening in the heart of Europe. And it looks like we have not learned the lessons because it is still happening in other parts of the world. So please look at the names and share it with your friends and family. I think Sarah had a quick point on that.
It's just go to Srebrenica. Go on the 11th of July if you can. Participate in the funeral, because DNA remains are found every year, because they're constantly finding pieces, and sometimes the bodies are re-exhumed and reburied. So you're having funerals constantly. Go on the 11th of July. Go to Bosnia. Take your family on holiday there. It is a beautiful, beautiful country. Wear the rosette. Go into stores, and you will see people who will come up to you and they say, do you know what this is? And we'll say, yes. And they say, where are you from? And you'll say, I'm from London. I'm from Huddersfield. I'm from, and they're like, you know? And you will have these conversations and they will weep with you. Go, support the economy, support the people, and know that their stories are still with us in the UK and they will never die.
Thank you, Sarah, for that beautiful conclusion. So all that remains for me to say is to thank you all for coming tonight to this event. Thank you all the speakers, especially the Alija Izetbegović Foundation for having the trust and confidence in us to host this event. Auntie Sabina will be in Bradford day after tomorrow for another event, a book festival. She'll be speaking there. It's hosted by the Yunus Emirates Institute in London. Look out for the details. But it's been a pleasure having you all today. But let us not do this once a year. We need to keep the message and the stories being told all over the year, inshallah. I leave it here. Thank you all so much. Look after yourselves. And inshallah, until next time we meet, look after yourself. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika. Oh, sorry, last message, bad news, bad news. Books are sold out. You'll have to go to the Ketab website. You can go to the website and order more. They've been sold out. If you have got a copy, bring it to the front and Sabina can sign it.